is surveillance capitalism? We keep hearing this term, but I think a lot of folks don't quite understand what it means and why it can be potentially dangerous.
All right, well, let's see if we can fix that real quick. So surveillance capitalism is an economic logic. That's the first thing to know. And the way it makes money is it claims our private experience as its source of free raw material. It translates that raw material into behavioral data. These are the data that are flowing through social media and all the other websites and ecosystems and applications and companies that you're online with, or that are on your phone, or that you're dealing with as you march through the city or go to work or you're in your car. It claims our experience is raw material, translates it into behavioral data, then that behavioral data is immediately reconceptualized as its private property. They then compute it, they turn it into predictions of our behavior, and they sell those predictions. That's how it works. The first big successful global market in predictions of our behavior were the online targeted advertising markets. The predictions
So
of our
you're talking
behavior.
about companies like Facebook, like
I'm
Google,
talking about
like
surveillance
Twitter.
capitalism was actually discovered, invented, first elaborated at Google 2000, 2001. It migrated to Facebook. It became the default paradigm for the tech sector, but it now runs through the normal economy, whether we're talking about health, education, insurance, real estate, retail. There is no industry that is exempt from this. Every product that begins with the word smart, every service that begins with the word personalized, every app on your phone is siphoning personal information to these big agglomerators, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, the Amazons, and so on.
So why is this such a problem? The title of your op-ed is "The Coup No One is Talking About." What coup?
All right, well, when we understand how this economic logic works and how surveillance capitalists compete, they're selling predictions. That means they're selling certainty. They're feeding their AIs with a lot of data in order for their AIs to produce these predictions of our behavior. We know, for example, at Facebook, its AI ingests trillions of data points every day and produces 6 million predictions of behavior every second. That's the scale that we're up against. So what they're doing is virtually everything we do that has an internet touch point is a supply chain interface for these companies. They are constantly capturing behavioral data from us. They have engineered ways of doing this that are outside of our awareness. They're designed to keep us ignorant because they know that we don't like it and we would resist. That's why it's called surveillance capitalism. It's designed to be hidden. And what happens is that all of this knowledge that they have amassed about us, I mean, think of this growing gap between what we can know and what can be known about us. Well, what is that knowledge doing? They're using that knowledge to target us, a range of targeting mechanisms that most people have heard about. You've heard about, for example, recommendation tools. You've heard about algorithms that amplify information specifically to you, subliminal cues, engineered social comparison dynamics, psychological microtargeting. These are ways that they use all of this knowledge to come back to us with targeting, to get us to manipulate our behavior or our attitudes, to shape our behavior, to tune our behavior in ways that align with their commercial objectives. And of course, what we've learned is that the same suite of operations can be rented. It's called political advertising, and it can be rented to any politician or candidate or oligarch, for that matter, anybody who's got enough money and knows how this works, to shift the whole thing from commercial objectives to political objectives. And that, of course, we've just seen the apotheosis of that on January 6th in Washington, D.C.
Now, you go on to argue that tech is sort of like the government we never elected. What should the government now do about this? I mean, the FTC, the Justice Department, they're scrutinizing big companies like Google and Facebook, but it sounds like a breakup of Google or a breakup of Facebook wouldn't necessarily fix the problem that you're talking about.
Look, the big question that I am posing to everyone who's listening to us right now and everyone that is a citizen in this democracy and all the democracies of the world, here's the question. Will the digital century be a democratic century? This is the key question. Right now, we do not have our democracy and all of the world's liberal democracies have failed to shape a vision of the digital future that is a democratic future, that is a future that will fulfill the aspirations of democratic people. And so these companies, the surveillance capitalists, they own the data, they own the technology, they are deciding on the principles of our social order. We need democracy to reclaim the data and technology for people and for society. And obviously, when I'm talking about democracy, I'm talking about we need law. We need the digital to live in democracy's house, under the rule of law, with the values that once again reorient data and technology to solving our problems and to solving society's problems. This is not the case right now. And unless we do that, we are drifting toward a future that is more dystopian, that is more surveillance-based, where all the power is lodged in these private companies that we did not elect, that are operating in ways that we do not choose. And we know that from all the survey research. When people find out about what these operations are really doing to us, it is universally rejected. But we have not had the opportunity to debate this as a society. So we need antitrust, but we also need to go beyond antitrust. We need to be able to create the new charters of rights, the new legislative frameworks, and the new kinds of democratic institutions that will keep this digital century safe for democracy. We did this in the 20th century, Emily.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by new democratic institutions?
Okay, that's a great question. So think about the industrial age, right? In the early stages of the industrial age, when factories were being built and people had to go to work in factories, the employers had all the power. There were no workers' rights. There were no consumer rights. There were no laws to protect people, right? That was the early stage of industrialization, and that's where we are now. We are in the infancy of our information civilization. And what happened in the 20th century? In America, for example, it took until the third and fourth decades of the 20th century before we had those rights codified in law. For example, for workers to join unions, to go on strike, to bargain collectively, consumer rights, to safe food, safe medicine, all these institutions that were invented in the 20th century, Emily, from the institutions that oversee banking to the institutions that oversee health and safety, the institutions that oversee all of our rights, whether it's, fair trade, stock market, just about every democratic institution you can think of was invented in the 20th century. Unemployment insurance, Social Security, these were all inventions of the 20th century. This is where we are now. This is the challenge that we face. The rights, the laws, and the institutions that will make the digital century now safe for democracy, as we did a century ago.